Good morning. Today is March 17th, 2020, a snowy Friday for some reason. And we are going to finish up the book of James today. Let's begin. James chapter 5, verse 1. Now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming upon you. Your wealth has rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. The corrosions will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. Look, the wages you failed to pay the workers who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the days of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered innocent men who were not opposing you. Look, this continues the condemnation of the rich that we've seen in James, but it also continues a very long prophetic tradition of criticizing the rich and those in power. Social justice and economic justice are major themes in Jewish prophetic literature. They are, I believe, major themes in the New Testament. It is amazing then that so often the themes of our religious movements aren't about economic and social justice. Again, there's not a matter of deserving here. It is a matter of what is right. That those who would hoard wealth, for whatever reason, do so at the expense of others. It is a given in the beliefs of the prophets. And I think that's borne out in practical reality. When there is suffering, when there is injustice, all you have to do is, as they said in that famous movie, follow the money. Or as the Roman philosophers put it, cui bono. Please forgive my Latin. Cui bono is who benefits. We should train ourselves to look at the world, and when we see people who are suffering, who are in poverty, who are struggling to make a living, who are wondering how they're going to survive, our response should not be, oh, well, they need to get a better job, or I wonder what they did wrong. It should be, who is oppressing them? The fault lies not in the poor, but the rich. And you may say, oh, well, that sounds terrible. That doesn't sound American. No, it's not. It really isn't. But it is biblical. And that, to me, trumps anything else. If we're going to look at people in love and want to help them, we have to address the systems and the people in those systems, the people who propagate those systems. If we want to help people, it is not sufficient to give them food when they are hungry. We must figure out why they are hungry. We must find what it is that keeps them in that condition. Far too often, we're willing to blame the victim rather than the perpetrator. Look at what's going on around you. This pandemic has exposed great inequalities in our world. Look at Detroit. Detroit is a hotbed for the virus, and it is almost universally in the Black community. Why, you say? Because they already had poor health conditions, poor living conditions. They're the ones who are going to suffer the most. Why do they have that? Because they're black. Because they have been mistreated and marginalized. Oh, well, I don't believe that, blah, blah, blah. Guess what? You are speaking from a position of privilege. Sometimes we do not want to condemn the rich because we want to identify with them. But the fact of the matter is, no matter what position you might be economically, if you are listening to me, it is highly unlikely you fall into the category of the rich. But you do fall into the category of the privileged. A lot of you. And it is your support of people in power like that that perpetuates these kinds of ills. You may not be suffering as much as someone else, but you too are oppressed. You just don't realize it because you are happy with where you are. And that's fine. But not when it comes to contributing to the suffering of others. James is very critical. So are the prophets of the rich, of those who are in power because the system protects them and perpetuates them and empowers them to stay where they are. James says their very success and wealth cries out against them. Let us continue. James chapter 5, verse 7. Be patient then, brothers, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits in the land to yield its valuable crop, and how patient he is for the autumn and spring rains. You too be patient and stand firm, because the Lord's coming is near. Don't grumble against each other, brothers, or you'll be judged. The judge is standing at the door. Brothers, as an example of patience in the face of suffering, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. As you know, we considered blessed those who have persevered. You have heard of Job's perseverance and have seen what the Lord finally brought about. The Lord is full of compassion and mercy. Above all, my brothers, do not swear, nor not by heaven or earth or by anything else. Let your yes be yes and your no be no, or you will be condemned. Okay, there's a couple of things there. First, there is something we see in a lot of the New Testament. This belief that Jesus' return is coming any moment. And there are a lot of people who feel that way today. Oh, the Lord's coming back any moment. If it makes you feel better, believe that. But Christians have believed that for 1900 years or longer. That does not change our perspective on the need to persevere. We continue because that is what we've been called to do. We've been called to follow the example of Christ. Christ, who in all of the suffering of Easter did not reject the cross. Knowing for how long, I don't know, but knowing at least some number of years by the Gospels that was where he was headed, he nevertheless continued on. We can persevere. Perseverance, by the way, is not a passive action. A stone does not persevere in a stream. A man holding a door against the enemy perseveres. A guard standing watch at night and staying up through the long hours perseveres. A runner in a marathon perseveres. Perseverance is not simply staying put, but it is pushing against that which would destroy us and tear us down, that which is wrong with the world. We may think that we persevere in suffering, but sometimes we just let it wash over us. We turtle up and let the waves wash across our shell. Perseverance rages against the storm and is still standing when the storm is past. He then adds this verse here about, above all, my brothers, do not swear. This is typical of wisdom literature, that you address an issue just for a little bit and you move on to the next thing. The idea being that these chunks of wisdom are something that you can memorize. Now, in the case of swearing, I always, I remember my grandmother would always say, I swanny. And I asked my mother, why does she say that? I was told, because the Bible says don't swear. That's a very legalistic interpretation, substituting one word for the other. That's not the point here. The point is not don't swear or don't take an oath. It is rather, do not let something outside of you be what holds you to the truth. Don't let consequences be what keeps you honest. Don't say, may I die if I break this oath. Let's no. You should be so full of the truth that your yes is a yes, and everybody knows it. Unqualified, unreserved. If I say I am going to do something, unless God hinders me, I will do it. If I say I will not do something, lest God provokes me, I will not do something. It would be nice if that level of truth was valued in our world. But I don't think it is. I don't think it's promoted. I think that we are, in fact, encouraged to keep things smooth, finagle things, lie a little bit. Something I've said to both of my girls lately is, don't lie, you're not good at it. Either get good at it or stop lying, because you're driving me crazy. It's little stuff. But we soon learn in this world, if we misrepresent the truth, things go easier on us. But that is not the path of Christ. Our yes should be yes, our no should be no, and we should be willing to face the consequences and persevere through them. We come to the end of the book of James. Is anyone in trouble? He should pray. Is anyone happy? Let him sing songs of praise. Is anyone sick? He should call the elders of the church to pray over him and anoint him with oil in the name of the Lord. The prayer offered in faith will make the sick person well. The Lord will raise him up. If he has sinned, he will be forgiven. Therefore confess your sins to each other. Pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous man is powerful and effective. We talk about prayer here again, but I want to call back to what we said on a previous episode about prayer. Our prayers are most effective when we are using them to tune ourselves to God, to seek His will and His understanding. I do believe that miracles happen still, that people are healed completely of things in ways that just physically and logically don't happen. But I don't think that they're common. I suppose if they were common, they wouldn't be miracles. But I do think prayer is as much about us finding the will of God as it is getting God to work our will in the world. We need to be careful of that. But prayer, nevertheless, should be our first recourse, our shelter, our comfort in times of distress. Knowing that we have a God who will listen and care as well as any human being we can possibly imagine would care for us. And that should be our comfort. Elijah was a man just like us. He prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it did not rain on the land for 3.5 years. Again he prayed, and the heavens gave rain, and the earth produced its crops. Yeah, I think that this is an interesting point here, that the people we see in the Bible, with the exception of Jesus, were just like us. We say, oh, to be like Peter, to be like Paul or Elijah or Isaiah. They were just people that were willing to be used by God. If we are willing, we too can be used. My brothers, if one of you should wander from the truth and someone should bring him back, remember this: whoever turns a sinner from the error of his ways will save him from death and cover over a multitude of sins. Correcting other people is a hard task. I still go with the be honest, but I also look at the proverb of the Old Testament that says, do not cast your pearls before swine. In other words, there are truths that are valuable and refined, and there are some people who just will not listen. They will not appreciate it. The writer of the Proverbs also says, first, correct a fool in his foolishness, or he will continue to be a fool. And then immediately says, do not correct a fool in his foolishness, or you will be proven a fool. It takes wisdom to know when and how to correct people. I think a lot of damage has been done because we have approached people with problems, with sin, as James says, in a way that is unhealthy and unhelpful to them or us. If we are to approach someone to address an issue in their life, we have to do so prayerfully. Carefully considering, is what they're doing actually against God, or is it just something we don't like? Far too often, our sense of righteous indignation is ignited not by an honest desire for righteousness, but a desire from conformity to our will or to some standard that we hold that is not God's. Correct others, but do so in love, with compassion and care, thinking through how and what you say. Otherwise, it's not going to work. They're just going to react, and react negatively. We come to the end of the book of James. It ends rather abruptly. As I said, while it begins with the form of a letter, it's not a letter. It's a pamphlet. It's a kind of modern wisdom literature. Something that the Jewish Christians it is written to would see and understand, be familiar with. It has some good advice for us today. Certainly the issues we've talked about related to wealth and the perseverance through suffering apply to stuff that we read in the papers every day. May you prayerfully consider the wisdom of James. Mull over it, chew on it. No wisdom literature is simple. It all requires a great deal of thought and perseverance and prayer. I hope you will join us Sunday. We will be speaking about, most likely, the road to Emmaus following Jesus' resurrection. And we will worship together as best we can during this time. As this concludes James, I will need some suggestions for next week. If I don't come up with something on my own, we're going to stick with books of the Bible right now, something that we know everybody will have access to. Until then, God bless you.